Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Exactly. We dive into all that dense material out there, the research, the reports.
And we pull out those crucial bits, those insights that really stick. You get the aha moments without, drowning in information.
Think of us as your guides, navigating through it all to find what genuinely matters in the sources you bring us.
And today, we're doing a deep dive based on the July 2025 edition of SHEM Highlights. That's from sustainablehealthequity.org.
Right, SHEM. For anyone perhaps not familiar, it stands for the Sustainable Health Equity Movement.
Yeah, they're quite unique. They bring together such a broad mix. Citizens, health advocates, scientists, academics.
Institutions, too, from all over the globe. Different cultures, different viewpoints. It's quite a coalition.
And their mission is pretty huge.
Oh, absolutely vital. They're pushing for the universal right to health. And crucially, for sustainable health equity to be like an ethical guide for all major policies, economic, social, environmental, both nationally and internationally.
And this specific SHEM Highlights edition, the one we're digging into, it was curated by Andre Luis Sales, Diana Zabalos, and Gustavo Bus. So props to them for pulling this together.
Definitely. They offer a really sharp perspective.
So let's get into it. SHEM turned its focus onto some major global financial talks recently, didn't they?
They did. And they found something. Well, something missing. They called it a moral and political void at a really key conference.
Okay, let's unpack that. That sounds like exactly where we need to start.
Yeah, it's fascinating how they boiled down such a massive event. They really focused on the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, FFD4.
Right, FFD4 in Seville, July 2025. That was supposed to be a big one for mapping out global development funding, wasn't it?
Supposed to be. And initially, the reports coming out sounded quite positive.
The SHEM Highlights mention that, too. They talk about grand rhetoric, a flood of lofty pledges.
And launching all these innovation platforms and voluntary coalitions. They even had a name for it, the Seville Commitment.
Sounds impressive on paper. Lots of action, maybe.
Well, that's the thing. SHEM's analysis just cuts right through that surface impression.
How so?
They argue that despite all the noise, the conference left this gaping moral and political void.
A void. Okay. What was the main failure point, according to SHEM?
The biggest issue was its failure to lock down meaningful public redistribution for sustainable equity, specifically through binding commitments on official development assistance, ODA.
Ah, ODA, the aid money. And SHEM pointed to the numbers, didn't they?
They did, and it really highlights the gap. ODA is still stuck at just 0.3% of the donor country's GDP.
0.3%. Wow. And the target has been 0.7% for how long now?
Decades. It's a long-standing target. And the key thing SHEM points out is that Seville produced no new binding commitment to actually reach that 0.7%. The gap remains.
Okay, so if the public money, the ODA commitments weren't really strengthened, what was the alternative being pushed? This is where SHEM saw a big shift, right?
Exactly. This is crucial. According to SHEM, the spotlight shifted to mobilizing private capital.
Private capital. So less government aid, more investment.
Pretty much. They talked about mechanisms like blended finance platforms, sustainability-linked bonds, risk-sharing schemes.
Okay, can you break those down a bit? What does that mean in practice?
Sure. Basically, these are financial tools designed to make it less risky and therefore more attractive for private companies to invest in things like development projects, maybe infrastructure or certain social programs in lower-income countries, often using some public funds or guarantees to sweeten the deal for the private sector.
I see. And SHEM's take on this shift?
They're deeply concerned. They argue that while these schemes might offer some limited, maybe short-term benefits, they effectively outsource global equity to the market, turning rights into returns.
Wow. Turning rights into returns. That's a powerful phrase.
It is. SHEM sees this as more than just a funding change. It's like redefining equity itself, moving it away from being a universal right needing public commitment towards becoming a commodity traded on the market.
Almost privatizing a global responsibility.
That's essentially the core of their critique on this point.
And SHEM didn't stop there. They drew a really unsettling comparison, didn't they, between this reluctance on development aid and military spending.
Yes, that contrast is stark. They point out that around the same time at a NATO summit, member countries actually agreed to raise military spending targets to 5% of GDP.
5%, compared to 0.3% for ODA, and struggling to even commit to 0.7%.
Exactly. SHEM puts it very directly. The richest nations on Earth appear ready to spend trillions on weapons, yet they recoil at allocating even 0.7% of their wealth to support planetary well-being.
That really throws the priorities into sharp relief, doesn't it?
It highlights a profound disconnect, yes, almost difficult to comprehend.
And then there was the recommendation for low-income countries coming out of the conference, something about domestic taxes.
Right. They were encouraged to raise their own domestic tax revenues to at least 15% of GDP.
Okay, so on one hand, rich nations aren't meeting aid targets, but on the other, poorer nations are told to raise more taxes domestically. How did SHEM view the fairness of that?
They called it deeply unfair, especially because it comes in the absence of any serious commitment to global redistribution from the wealthiest nations.
It does seem like a double standard.
Mm-hmm. And Wangare, one of the SHEM curators they quote, really sums it up. He says, "What's missing is not data or technical capacity, but political will, ethical clarity, and courage."
Political will and ethical clarity. That seems to be the recurring theme.
Absolutely. SHEM is firm on this. Well-being cannot be commodified. And equity. Well, equity is not a side effect of financial engineering. It is a right that requires structural redistribution.
So it's not about finding clever financial fixes. It's about fundamental structure change.
Precisely. And they end that section with a really powerful call to action.
What was that?
The tools exist. What the world needs now is a profound moral realignment, from profit to planet, from militarism to mutual care.
From profit to planet, from militarism to mutual care. That's quite a call. Okay, so that covers SHEM's assessment of the official conference. But their highlights report also looked beyond that, right? To the voices of civil society.
Yes, and that's really important context. SHEM made sure to capture what various civil society groups, the ones watching the Seville conference closely, were demanding. It paints a broader picture of the pushback.
So what were some of those key voices saying?
Well, for instance, Greenpeace. They framed the moment as a fundamental opportunity to reform global tax rules and address injustices.
Okay, tax rules. What was their focus there?
Holding polluters accountable, for one, and pushing for progressive taxes on the wealthy and corporations.
To fund what, specifically?
To directly finance climate action, environmental protection, and, importantly, public services. They weren't vague about it.
Did they have specific demands on the mechanics?
Yes, they called for fair, transparent global tax rules, support for the UN tax convention process, which is a big deal in itself, and critically explicit commitments to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels.
Get rid of the fossil fuel subsidies. That's a long-standing demand from environmental groups.
Indeed. Then you had IFMSA, the International Federation of Medical Students Associations.
Ah, the future health professionals. What was their angle?
They strongly advocated for equitable and sustainable health financing. And they really emphasized youth participation, getting future health workers involved in these global financial decisions.
Makes sense. Their future is directly impacted. Who else did SHEM highlight?
Fos Feminista. They brought a crucial perspective, highlighting the need for development finance to reflect feminist principles.
Meaning
Prioritizing diverse populations, especially those often marginalized, and using transformative approaches that actively promote gender justice. Not just add-ons, but core principles.
Right. And save the children. Their focus is obvious, but what was their specific message around the conference?
They were very clear. They called the conference a crucial opportunity to reform a global financial system that currently fails children.
Fails children. Strong words.
Very. Their global leader urged for urgent and strategic investments to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, with a real emphasis on financing for education, health, and child protection.
So a range of voices environment, tax justice, health, youth, feminist perspectives, children's rights.
But all converging on similar themes, right? The need for justice, equity, structural change, proper financing for public goods, and holding powerful actors accountable.
And all resonating with SHEM's core message about sustainable health equity and structural redistribution?
Exactly. It shows SHEM wasn't alone in its assessment of Seville's shortcomings. There was a significant coordinated call from civil society for something much more fundamental.
Okay, so the picture from Seville itself, according to SHEM and civil society, was, well, pretty disappointing in terms of concrete commitments to redistribution. But SHEM's report didn't end on a completely downbeat note, did it? They pointed towards an alternative.
That's right. They highlighted a movement that offers a different path, a beacon of hope, you might say, the concept of a well-being economy, and specifically the Well-Being Economy Alliance, or WHEEL.
WHEEL. Okay, tell us about them. What's the core idea?
WHEEL was set up in 2018. SHEM describes it as The foremost coalition organizations, alliances, movements, individuals, all working towards building a well-being economy.
And what defines a well-being economy? How is it different?
The fundamental shift is in the goal. Instead of prioritizing profit or just GDP growth above all else, it prioritizes human and ecological well-being directly.
So well-being first, profit second. Or maybe as a means, not an end.
Something like that. The aim is to speed up this transition through what they call radical connection and collaboration, bringing together all these different groups to build momentum.
And SHEM mentioned practical examples too. It's not just theory.
Definitely not just theory. They highlighted things like a free well-being economy policy design course that WHEEL offers.
A course? For whom?
Developed by policymakers for policymakers. It shares real-world insights from leaders in what they call well-being economy, governments, or WeGo.
WeGo, like actual governments putting this into practice.
Yeah, places like Scotland, New Zealand, Iceland, Wales, Finland. Governments that are already trying to embed well-being principles into their actual policies.
So things like New Zealand's famous well-being budget.
Exactly. Or Scotland's focus on community wealth building. It shows concrete ways these ideas are being implemented, providing blueprints for others. It's about tangible policy shifts, not just aspirations.
Okay, so connecting this back to the bigger picture, what's the really fundamental shift SHEM and WHEEL are advocating for in how we even think about economics?
It's about fundamentally challenging what we measure and therefore what we value, moving beyond narrow metrics like GDP as the main indicator of success.
Because GDP doesn't capture everything that matters for well-being.
Precisely. It doesn't measure inequality, environmental damage, community strength, mental health. Lots of things crucial to actual human thriving. The push is to build an economy that truly serves everyone, people, and the planet.
So redefining success itself, instead of just asking, is the economy growing? Asking, are people and the planet flourishing?
That's the core of it. Imagine measuring success by falling stress levels or cleaner air or stronger social connections alongside economic stability. That's the kind of reevaluation they're pushing for, challenging the very basis of how we judge national progress.
Right. This deep dive has definitely surfaced a real tension. On one side, you have the Seville conference, lots of talk, maybe some innovative finance ideas, but ultimately, as SHEM saw it, a failure on core public redistribution commitments.
Yeah, and that shift towards private capital, potentially turning rights into market opportunities, while military spending just keeps climbing.
And then on the other side, this powerful unified call from SHEM and groups like Greenpeace, IFMSA, FOS Feminista, Save the Children.
All demanding ethical clarity, real structural change, fair redistribution, and that fundamental shift towards a well-being economy.
SHEM's message seems incredibly clear. The tools, the ideas, they exist.
They do. The knowledge is there. The examples, like from the WeGo countries, are emerging.
Which brings us back to their powerful call for that profound moral realignment, from profit to planet, from militarism to mutual care.
It really frames the challenge starkly.
Yeah.
It's presented not just as a technical problem, but a moral one.
So that leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about. If SHEM is right, if the world needs this profound moral realignment, and if the tools and ideas for a more equitable, well-being focused future already exist, what single shift in your own sphere, maybe in your community, your workplace, even just your own consumption habits, however small it might seem, what single shift could contribute, even slightly, towards that bigger vision of prioritizing well-being?